Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And today we're talking about Bacurau, a Brazilian film.
Yes.
Which you knew a little bit about, maybe? I certainly didn't.
Well, actually, I'd only heard friends online getting excited about it. I think it won the jury prize at the Cannes Film Festival this year. And it's a Brazilian film, right? So that's exciting because their film industry has, gone up and down, and production almost came to a standstill a few years ago, I understand. So it's an exciting thing for a Brazilian film to be so praised, and internationally.
Yeah. It's playing on Mubi at the moment, and it's playing on there for the next 3 weeks or so.
Yes.
And apropos of nothing, I'd say it's really worth checking out. I found it so interesting. It's really good.
It's so good. I mean, this is the thing about Mubi at the moment. It's just extraordinary what they're showing, really. And, you think with films like this that it's somehow going to be difficult, that it's going to be like a bit of a drag. Yeah, it's... And actually, what I ended up finding with this is that it immediately kind of, grips you and enchants you, and it kind of creates this world, and you're shown these characters, and it's fabulously entertaining, and it's also much more. It reminds you really of what cinema can be. So I'm very excited by it.
Yeah, well, I'd say first of all, it's a film that can be spoiled. It has secrets and revelations, and we are going to go into those, no doubt. So I'd make sure to check it out, first of all, if you haven't seen it, because I don't want you to, you should go into it kind of blind.
Yes.
I suppose the most spoiler-free setup I could give it would be that it's about a very small village, literally a couple of roads and a few houses in the northeast of Brazil, in kind of the outback, the wilderness kind of area, called Bacurau. And a girl comes home to Bacurau for the funeral of her grandmother, who's, I think, 94 years old. Mm. And you get a kind of a portrait of what life is like here, why people would leave, why they come back, how the community lives. And then, and this is the most spoiler-free way I can say it, weird stuff starts happening.
Yes.
I mean, that is about as much as you can say without going into that territory. So that's where we'll leave it for that. Yes. We're going into spoiler territory now. You see a UFO. And that's when you start thinking, well, this isn't quite what I expected. I don't know about you, Jose.
Well, I didn't read it as a UFO. I read it very much as a drone.
Okay.
So the way that I understood the film at the beginning was, so a truck goes through this mountain range, and what they see is coffins, right? And dead people next to the coffins. And then you see a dam, that's kind of cutting off water. So I immediately thought, well, this is going to be kind of, a political film about a village that's being deprived of water by crooked politicians, right? Which actually is part of the story, right? Mm. But it's by no means the whole story. So, when I saw the drone, I just thought, well, it's a drone. Like, these villagers are under surveillance. Right, the film begins. The film begins by saying, "This is a few years from now." Right, so, you expect things to have changed, but largely remain the same, and also those things of drones and so on are not really even futuristic. Yeah, kind of, So
well, I think the film definitely asks that question of you immediately, because the drone is shaped like a classic flying saucer. Yeah. And it has kind of lights around the edge, so it doesn't look like your normal drone. And also, the film's starting off with that shot from space, slowly going in to zooming into the area of Brazil where it's set. Yes. I linked those together and I said, okay, so is this going to become an alien invasion type thing? Uh-huh. That's kind of that's a space I was put in by that. You very quickly realise that that's not what it is, but there is a kind of a most dangerous game thing going on. You discover a group of largely American people who are there on a kind of what seems to be a kind of pay for sort of kill people safari, like the way they, like those safaris that rich people go on in Africa to shoot lions and take them home and put on their walls. You kind of get the feeling that's what it's like. And they're led by Udo Kier.
Yes. But before that, let's linger a bit before that, actually, because I think there's about, you only become aware of that, I would say, 45 minutes to an hour into the film, and a lot happens before that, right? And what happens is that you're introduced to this village, you're introduced to a way of life. The village actually reminded me very much of my village. Yeah, people who've known each other their whole lives. Uh, who the village is emptying out. At the funeral, the school teacher, who is the son of the woman who died, talks about, how lots of people who loved this woman couldn't be there because they're in Sao Paulo, they're in, the United States, they're in Europe. Yeah, the whole family's kind of dispersed, but since they couldn't be there, they've brought things, and, what they've brought is a chest full of medicine, and yeah. So, and you're introduced to that way of life, which, kind of, it felt both lovely and odd. It's a place that's clearly accepting, so you have like lesbians and you have transgender people, and people are very easy about sex, and they're walking around naked, and, the men and the women wash together. It creates a world, doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you about your relationship to this film, because it did strike me as well that you would see this as very reminiscent of the town you grew up in.
Yes.
I mean, it's probably smaller even than where you grew up, but it's a similar kind of remote area. You grew up in Spain, obviously.
It is, and it's integrated that way. So, everyone would know the mayor, everyone would know the school teachers. Yeah, like, a lot of people live abroad but come back for weekends or summers, or ties are maintained, but it's a small village that's not even on the map. Bacurau, right? This
or
whole
at least,
thing.
well, I think the suggestion is it's been taken off the map.
It's been taken off the map. Well, and which is what's happening, at least in Spain. A lot of villages become depopulated and disappear. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if. I mean, this is a much more acute political parable, right?
Yes.
So the point of comparison can only go so far. But
yeah, well, as opposed to being depopulated, the town in this film, Bacurau, is deliberately taken off the map, and there seems to be the ultimate kind of resolution of everything that's been going on. Seems to be that the mayor, because these people are in the way and causing problems, wants them wiped out, and he's made this deal with Udo Kier to kill them all, and obviously it backfires, as you find out. But so it occurs to me that having the town kind of taken off the map, literally taken off the map off Google Earths, it's a deliberate act in this film, and quite a sinister one.
And that ties in very neatly, because what saves the town is a knowledge of history. It's its museum and what that represents, right? And kind of, that museum is not only a sociological museum of the way of life of its people, but a repository of historical memory, and of a historical memory of rebellion, right? So they've resisted this encroachment, by the metropolis, by federal powers, by people who basically want to steal from them and use up their resources. Which is why I thought the thing about the water initially, to me, was very interesting, because I thought the film would be just about that. But instead, these people are rendered so worthless that you have American safari company. They're like safaris, except, instead of hunting lions, you hunt poor people, really.
Yeah, because most of those Americans coming in to do that safari are not in it for this greater political game that you find out is kind of underneath it. They're there to... I mean, you have the one guy who says he has this homicidal hatred for his ex-wife, and he says, well, God has given me the chance to take that out on these people who don't matter.
Yes.
So for him, the reason is not this thing about the water and whatever. That's just kind of, he's being used by the people in charge, if you like, for that.
And the film kind of wonderfully delineates, questions of relative morality. So these men and women who go on a safari because, murdering is fun, and they don't conceive of these people as people, all of a sudden have qualms. So one of them says, oh, it's terrible to kill children. The other one says, I don't kill women. Yeah, but the fact that kind of what they're engaging with is this murder that comes through dehumanization, is kind of something that none of them question. It's really powerful. I thought the scenes with a young boy, was very incredible. And actually, many aspects of the film to me were moving.
I think one of the reasons I found it powerful is that, and this will sound like a backhanded compliment, it's kind of rough with its political allegory. Like it's not too subtle about it. It kind of smacks you in the face with what it's saying to you. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, but there was only one scene that I thought that was just too awkward and too crude, and that is this. When the Brazilians go on the motorcycles, yeah, and then they return from the village and they kill 2 people, and then they go and meet all of the people on the safari, right?
Yeah, so they have that meeting around the table.
Meeting. I thought that was kind of crude, really.
I know what you mean. That was actually one of my favourite scenes.
Oh, I thought it was crude.
Having it kind of spelled out, because it's not spelled out in terms of like it's all done through what the characters think and their attitudes towards each other. And there's that whole thing about the 2 Brazilians who've been hired. They look white, but they're not white, and things like that. I could certainly understand you finding that too on the nose, but that's actually something that I like. That kind of took it into kind of flat out satire territory for me, which I enjoyed.
Well, I like the ideas, but I thought that the expression of them or the dramatization of them were quite crude, especially that American woman I love to kill, and ha, you think you're white, haha, you're like a hot Latino, that kind of thing. It just kind of creeped me out, really.
I did quite like, though, you do immediately get the sense once you follow the motorcyclists back to that sort of camp, and you're introduced to the camp and you see the people kind of moving around within it, you do really get a sense of what these people are like and what they value. And you have that one guy who's just sat in a room cleaning a gun, and you have the other guy, or maybe it's the girl talking about, I can't remember exactly what her story was, but she's basically telling like the camera, I think, I saw this Tommy gun when I was 11 years old, and the guy who owned it let me hold it, and I was in love from that. And this whole thing about love for guns in particular.
Yeah.
And there's a difference. There's a thing in the film about they use guns and the people who are in the town don't, although they then go into their museum where they have all these historical guns. And the thing about using the Americans don't use modern weaponry. Like they have a fucked up code about we don't use modern weaponry. We use vintage weapons. So somehow it's not killing. I don't know.
Yeah, it's to make it more sporting, I guess. And the irony, of course, is that, the people resist really using 19th century guns right from the museum.
Yeah, exactly.
Which are truly
like
vintage.
Zapata type weaponry.
The Americans' notion of vintage is like 1995 or something, right?
yeah, they still have some fairly recent looking pistols in their armory. Yeah.
So,
I also wanted to ask you, because what occurred to me then when I was thinking about the town that you grew up in and the relationship that you might have, or what you might recognise about kind of your way of life back then in this, it then made me think about oh god, I can't remember his name, the dictator of Spain,
Franco.
It made me think about Franco, and made me think about then Bolsonaro, and how that there might be a relationship there. And there's definitely a big distrust of politics in this film and political figures.
Yes. I mean, the guy, Tony, whatever his name was, the mayor of the area, so not even of the town, but of the whole region, that scene where they take the young women, right, and, they ride off with her, for sex, and she goes unwillingly, but kind of knowing that she has to. It's so chilling. It really is like government as like, not only crooks and so on, but pimps, kind of just a complete abuse of power. That there's no justice and everyone knows. And it's very telling that when he comes in, with all his little gifts, people stay indoors, right? And they yell crook, sleazeball and whatever, but they do it indoors, right? They don't come out. I
thought that was a wonderful scene because when they hear that the mayor's showing up, everyone's kind of like, oh, quick, get to it. And what I thought was, oh, they need to make everything spick and span so everything's nice for the mayor. And actually what you find that they've done is they've just put everything away and hidden inside their houses because they don't respect this guy, don't want to talk to him, don't want to give him the time of day.
Yes, and don't trust him, So I mean, those scenes are very powerful, and I think they are very much a critique of Bolsonaro at the moment, right? And you're told very clearly. So, the film makes this whole thing about a north-south divide in Brazil, a rural urban, a white indigenous. Because my understanding is that, Brazil not only has like Portuguese people and so on, but there was a huge German population, yeah, from after the war as well. So and lots of Italian immigrants and lots of slaves, yeah, former kind of African
There
slaves.
was a huge slave trade there, wasn't there?
Yeah. So, but you can see how there are still gradations of belongingness, power. So questions of race are also tied to questions of class, and then there's also North America, South America version of it, right? So, when that group of safari tourists kill the two collaborators, because that's what they are, they find out that one of them is working in the district attorney's office, right? So he's not just he's selling out his own people. He thinks he's superior to them because he's whiter, right? On the other hand, it shows you the crookedness of the system, that somebody kind of working in the DA's office or the justice system. I'm not too clear exactly what his function was, except that he was a lawyer with a high position in this, is literally selling out his own people for money and having them killed, right? And then kind
Yeah.
of I mean, it really is kind of quite powerful, I think.
Yeah.
I love the music. I love the way that the widescreen was used, because it was used very fluidly. So often there was a handheld camera feel, to this widescreen. I love the way that, unlike a lot of North American cinema, the widescreen encompasses communities. So it's very rare to see just like a close up of one face, right? Kind of, you often have like groups of people in the frame, yeah? Yeah, so you get the sense of like kind of community as opposed to Udo Kier, who often is alone in the frame, yeah? But when you see the people in the village, the frame is peopled, yeah?
That's
So
true. That's a good point.
so I like that very much. Um, and actually symbolically, the village being saved by its museum, by its history, yeah,
Yeah.
I thought that was like really powerful.
There's a point made about the museum where, or not a point exactly, but the film focuses on when people come to the village, particularly those two motorcyclists. Oh, are you going to visit the museum? Have you come here to see our history?
Yes.
And they say no. But there's a point about you see inside various buildings in the town, people's houses and the doctor's office and the school, but you just see the outside of the museum,
Yes.
and when push comes to shove, and it's clear there's going to be this kind of siege thing happening at the end of the film. I thought, that is exactly where they're hiding. And of course, they're not just hiding there; they're hiding in the school and a few other places. But I thought, like, that is going to be a focus of this scene. It has to be. And I thought it was wonderfully orchestrated, and wonderfully kind of put together. And the guy who goes into the museum, the tourist who goes into the museum, is the one who had the qualm about killing the kid. You kind of get the feeling that he's like, if any of them is on a kind of if any of those people has an inclination to question what he's doing, he would be the one. He doesn't really. I mean, he is still there looking for people to kill, but it kind of makes sense. He would be the one who goes into the museum, I think. And then you have the thing of when they kill him, and it's brutal, and they're cleaning up afterwards. They sweep the floors and they wash the floors, but the woman who runs the museum, I think, makes a point of the bloodstains on the walls, keep them there.
Yes.
It has to remain. It's like that. What has happened here has become part of our history, and the museum is the place for it to be. And she says, unfortunately,
Yes.
like it's not a proud thing that they've had to behave so brutally and do what they've done, but it is a part of their history now. They respect and know that.
Yeah. I also love how at the end of the film, there's been all these people died, families have been killed, children have been killed, people have lost their families, people have lost their children, but nonetheless, life goes on. Yeah, like it hasn't defeated them, right? Kind of, the village is still there, the people are still there, and the Udo Kier character is buried alive, right? So
Yeah.
I also think that the structure is that of a Western, yeah? And, certainly the thing with the coffins is straight out of Sergio Leone film. I can't remember which one.
Yeah.
But, kind of in one of them, they go into town with coffins, right? And I think in the Leone film, those are exactly the people they're going to kill. So I think that, the film is a sin-illiterate film, but also it's kind of, if you think of the structure of the Western, right? Well, on the one hand, it is about bringing civilization to the wilderness. So this one is not about that, but some other Westerns are about a town under siege, right?
Yeah.
And who's going to have the courage, to stand up, to the threat, yeah, from the outside. So, and I think this film is very much like that. And actually, the film's moral point of view is that many types of criminality, or are many types of behavior that society at one point condemns, are in fact not criminal. And what is really criminal is, politicians being crooked, politicians whoring and pimping, and politicians selling out their own people. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's, so you could be a whore, but a whore votes. Yeah, it's one of the things the film tells you, right?
Yes, that's right.
And actually being a whore is not half as bad as being a politician who's selling out the people he's representing for money, yeah, and having them die, yeah, exchanging their lives for money. Yeah, that's about the worst that you can be, right?
Yeah, well, there's definitely a thing as well with the Western thing of that final scene, as you say, the thing about the town under siege, the feeling of when the tourists enter the village in that final kind of third, and it's deserted, nobody's there.
Yeah.
You could just see the tumbleweed going across the screen in a Western, you know what I mean, in an American Western, like it's absolutely identical. There's also a sense. I wonder if I'm thinking of Once Upon a Time in the West. The focus on water as a resource,
yes,
and like that's such a huge thing. I think it's probably there in lots of westerns, but the idea of these huge natural resources. Chinatown is actually one. Chinatown's not a western, but it really reminds me of that. The idea that kind of what these people need is water, and it's being held from them by the powers that be. This dam, and it literally is killing them to not have it, And then the water truck that arrives is shot. The water is depleted. Actually, it makes me think of Dark Waters as well in a way. Like Dark Waters had that. That was all about water, the water supply, and literally power over people through that. It's such a kind of potent idea.
Well, it is, I think going to be the new, scarce resource. I mean, yeah, kind of, drinking water, fresh drinking water is already a problem in many countries around the world, and it's becoming increasingly so through, temperature change, through environmental change. So it's a very good theme.
And you have the guy who runs Nestle, I think, who basically wants to own it.
Yes, exactly.
Water shouldn't be a public good. I should own it and be able to sell it.
Yeah,
which is the most fucked up thing you can possibly imagine.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary. I also liked, so the world that the film depicts is a lawless world, right? It almost reminds me of reading like medieval romances, or, i.e. that once you leave your town, once you're on the road outside your town, you're no longer safe. Yeah, kind of, it's a failed state. There's no protection for you. You either go on the road with your own gunmen, or, you're kidnapped by highwaymen or whatever. Yeah. And this is exactly what this film is. People are only relatively safe, and not even then, but more so when they're in the confines of the town. As soon as they leave the town, they're prey to all kinds of things, including, Western safaris who are using them as prey, who are preying on them.
Yeah.
So, it's a wonderful film. Actually, I was really riveted and moved. I was surprised, actually. So at the beginning, there's like this wonderful, the cliche of Brazilians, right? It's kind of, so on the one hand, it's a funeral and it's sad, but it's also a bit wild. And, and then kind of people are very at ease with each other, with difference, with their bodies. There's an emphasis on food, on music, right? And then it begins from there, and it unravels really, or becomes harsher. It becomes like Mad Max a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, there is an element of that. Well, water's a resource in that as well, I suppose.
Yeah.
Actually, fuel is the main resource in that. But yeah, it does have that similar feel, doesn't it?
It does.
What did you think of the thing about the funeral and the woman who dies, and the doctor who is clearly
that's
an
Sonia
old friend
Braga.
of hers?
Sonia Braga, by the way, the doctor who is, one of, well, she's the only Brazilian star that I know of that broke through internationally, right?
Right.
So she was a big Brazilian star, but then she also made a lot of indie films in the US in the 1980s and 90s, right? So she's a big star, in fact. Sonia
Right.
Braga.
Well, she's wonderful in this, and she does have a pride of place in the cast. You can tell.
Yes.
But her character is clearly an old friend of some description of the woman who's died, and drunkenly, I think it's kind of later implied, she speaks out at the funeral that this woman, she was a problematic woman. I can't remember exactly what she says because this is right at the start of the film, but she kind of speaks out against her, and then later she apologises for it. But there is this whole unresolved thing about who this woman was and what her relationship was, and I mean, I kind of felt like I would have liked that to be more resolved.
No, I thought it was resolved, because then you see pictures of them, and you see pictures of them when they're younger, and they've clearly been best friends all their lives, right?
Yeah.
So and at the beginning they tell you, well, forgive whatever her name is. She's the only one who's expressing her pain, right?
Yeah.
And then you see later, in fact, that they have been very close all their lives, yeah. So that it's amazing.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like that kind of what broke them up, what happened between them. I just suppose I kind of half wanted and half expected more out of that funeral scene, because it seems to set up the entire film. It's the reason that the girls come home, and there does seem to be something. There's clearly something very important about this woman. The whole town turns out for her funeral. I suppose, as you say, it is a small town and everyone's very close knit, so that would be a reason. But there does seem to be. Well, I thought there would be something about, she dies and then things start unraveling, and she, what part does she play in that? I don't know.
No,
I felt like there was something being indicated there that wasn't paid off. Ultimately.
Well, I don't agree with you. I mean, I think that her funeral is a mechanism to show you the town and the people in it, and the bonds and affinities that people have within it, right? So that's how you get introduced to the school teacher and the family, and it's the mechanism through which you're introduced to I forget what his name is, but the guy who'd been a gangster and who now wants another name. He's returning to civilian life.
His new name is Acacio.
Acacio, that's right.
His old name is Pacoch.
That's right. So, the funeral is that mechanism, right? Also, I love that moment, by the way, when the granddaughter asks Acacio, do you want to sleep with me tonight? Yeah?
Yeah.
So,
well, I knew you would. You love that sort of thing.
I love that sort of thing.
Well, I thought that was the 120 beats per minute moment. We're at this awful place in our lives. I'll wank you off.
Well, actually, you see more than that. Actually, I loved all of that. I thought it was kind of wonderful, and the film is a very, very powerful political parable as well. Obviously about Brazil, but also I think one that resonates elsewhere, actually. And actually, I think it's very interesting in these times of pandemic, to see how those dictators, because that is what Bolsonaro is, how they will be put to the test, right? Because, they're so obsessed, and their only function is to steal other people's money, right? To kind of oppress people so that they and their cronies can make more money. Right?
Yeah.
So, and they manage to fool people like Trump does, through a control of the media and the control of a particular type of discourse. But actually, this pandemic is going to put all of that to a test. Yeah, because when people are dying around you, you can buy as many commercials as you want, but you're not going to be able to paint a rosy picture of life.
Yeah.
So it will be interesting to see the effect that this has on them.
The final thought I had was that at the end of the film, I was reminded of the manipulative power of cinema, in that when Udo Kier is buried alive, he's imprisoned underground, and then a board's put on top of the hole, and then it's buried, so you know he's going to starve and die under there. I felt so good, because he's been such an awful person, and of course, doing that to someone, it's hideous what they're doing to him. But it's the power of the revenge story, isn't it?
Yes.
It's that thing that Irreversible did so well, where at the start of Irreversible, the guy gets his face mashed in by that fire extinguisher, and if that had happened at the end after he's committed the rape, and that's the revenge, you'd feel much better about it. Like it's that I'm watching it going, oh, good on them. And then going, oh no, that's horrible.
It was wonderful, actually. I highly recommend it to everyone. It's I've been praising Mubi recently because they are showing things that I couldn't see anywhere else in town, actually, or and actually they are not only showing one, but they're showing like dozens of a combination of classic films and then films like this. It really is quite extraordinary. The Melville films are like, superb noirs, right? Kind of crime films. Then you have the Cocteau films. Then you have the Bergman films. I mean, it really is kind of a quite an extraordinary selection, including all of this fantastic new Latin American cinema, that is not just what they could pick up. It actually is, the Latin American cinema that has, the best of Latin America. Yeah, what's won Cannes and so on, right? It's really quite extraordinary. And you feel a certain sense, I don't know, of security. It's what Mubi provides you with, yeah, that, kind of because they've selected these films, and because your experience of seeing these new films that they're putting on has been so satisfying, that it almost kind of makes you less afraid to see them, like kind of, yeah. I mean, because, some of these films could be hard work, and you think, oh God, am I actually, going to go to the Midlands Arts Centre, and, it'll take me an hour to get there, and, and I'll have to walk, and, and so on. And then like, yeah, kind of, yeah. Whereas actually with this, you feel like the film is curated. It isn't. It hasn't just been put there.
Yeah, the work that Mubi has put in is what gives you the confidence that this is going to be worth pursuing. And looking into, and even if I don't like it, well, there's a reason it's here. As opposed to if you see one of 10 million films on Netflix, if it's crap, you go, maybe there was no reason to have watched it in the first place. Yeah. You go, if I didn't like this, well, there's got to be a reason that it was on there, because it's one of only 30.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's wrap this up. I highly recommend it. I think it's a beautiful film. It's a really powerful film, and I thought it was very moving.
I thought it was a cracker. And I liked, if you got this far and you haven't watched it, then we've ruined everything that kind of twists and turns. And the twists and turns are some of the most enjoyable parts of it, because it went to places that I really wasn't expecting, or made moves that I wasn't expecting. And I think it ties together really, really nicely, and just about every part of it works for me. I had a great time.
Okay, excellent. So, thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify and YouTube to listen to us. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Obrigado. That's all of my Portuguese.